$50,000 disappears quickly in the world of manufacturing. It was enough to lease a small, grimy workshop in an industrial park on the forgotten side of town, a space that smelled of rust and damp concrete. It was enough to put a down payment on a second-hand CNC machine, a hulking beast of metal and wires that became the mechanical heart of my nascent operation. After the first month's rent and the equipment purchase, I was left with fumes. I had the tools to build an army, but no money to pay the soldiers. I knew I couldn't do it alone. I was a designer, a craftsman. I knew wood, but I didn't know business plans or marketing funnels or how to charm investors. My passion needed a partner. It needed a pragmatist. I found her at a local small business pitch night. The event was a parade of hopeful entrepreneurs, hawking everything from artisanal dog food to a revolutionary new kind of sock. I was there to listen, to learn, to feel like I was part of a world that was building things instead of letting them decay. My pitch wasn't on the official schedule, but during the networking portion afterwards, I struck up a conversation with a woman who had been asking all the smartest questions. Her name was Jenna Morales. She was sharp, energetic, with a quick, no-nonsense smile and eyes that seemed to be constantly calculating angles. She'd just left a lucrative but soul-crushing job in venture capital and was looking for a project she could believe in. I showed her my sketchbook. I told her my story, the whole ugly, painful story of Callahan and Sons, of my father, of the rejection. I expected pity. Instead, her eyes lit up with a predatory gleam. "So let me get this straight," she said, flipping through my designs with a practiced eye. "Your father is the undisputed king of the old guard, high-end market. He has the name, the reputation, the legacy clients, but he's inefficient, he's allergic to technology, and he thinks the internet is a fad." "That about sums it up," I said. "And you," she continued, tapping a drawing of a sleek, cantilevered desk, "have the same training, the same eye for quality, but with a modern aesthetic and a plan to build smarter, faster, and cheaper." She looked up at me. "A legacy brand with a succession crisis and an heir with a revolutionary idea he's been kicked out for. Finn, this isn't just a business plan. This is a story, a drama, and I can sell the hell out of that." That night, we sketched out a partnership on the back of a napkin. We called the company Axiom Design, a name that spoke of foundational truths, of a new set of principles. Jenna would be the CEO, handling the business, the fundraising, the marketing. I would be the chief creative officer, running the workshop, the design, the production. She would find the money, I would make the furniture. Jenna was a force of nature. Within 2 weeks, she had refined my scattered ideas into a killer pitch deck. A week after that, she secured our first round of angel investment from a wealthy tech investor she knew who was looking to diversify his portfolio. It was $150,000. It felt like $100 million. Suddenly, we had capital. We could hire a small team. We could buy raw materials. We were real. Our first hire was a deliberate, strategic poach. His name was Old Man Hemlock. He wasn't actually old, maybe 50, but he'd been my father's head finisher for 30 years. He was a magician with stains and lacquers, a quiet genius who was as resistant to change as my father. Or so I thought. I met him for a beer, my heart pounding with guilt. I was asking this man to betray a lifetime of loyalty. "Hemlock," I said, "I've started my own company. I need you." He took a long sip of his beer and looked at me. "Your father's a fool, Finn," he said, his voice raspy. "He's a proud, stubborn fool. He's driving that place into the ground. The way he treated you, it was a crime." He sighed. "He won't listen to new ideas. He won't buy new equipment. I've been using the same ventilation system since 1995. I'm tired. And I'm tired of watching good craftsmanship get wasted." He looked me straight in the eye. "You tell me you're building something new, something smart. You tell me you're putting in a ventilation system that won't kill me. Then you've got yourself a finisher." He was the first person from my old life to cross the border into my new one. And his defection was a quiet declaration of war. The message it sent back to the Callahan and Sons workshop was unmistakable. The future was being built somewhere else. The first 6 months of Axiom Design were a frantic blur of controlled chaos. Our small workshop was a hive of activity. The whine of the CNC machine, a constant counterpoint to the hiss of Hemlock's spray gun, and the rhythmic scrape of hand sanding. We were a tiny, lean crew, me, Hemlock, and 2 young carpenters, who were hungry to learn. Jenna was a whirlwind, a blur of phone calls and spreadsheets, transforming my designs into a brand. We weren't just making furniture. We were building a philosophy. Our wood was sustainably sourced. Our designs were modular, meant to adapt to modern, smaller living spaces. Our marketing, masterminded by Jenna, was brilliant. We didn't sell tables and chairs. We sold intelligent design solutions for modern life. She built a slick website and a powerful Instagram presence, showcasing our work with the kind of polished, aspirational photography my father would have scoffed at. Our first big break came from an architect named Isabel Reed, a rising star in the city known for her hypermodern, minimalist designs. She was designing a new, trendy downtown cafe and was looking for furniture that matched her aesthetic. She had approached Callahan and Sons first. My father, she told me, had looked at her plans and told her his style was more timeless. He'd refused the commission. We invited her to our workshop. I walked her through our process, showing her how the precision of the machines allowed for a level of detail that was nearly impossible by hand, and how Hemlock's traditional finishing techniques gave the final product a warmth and soul that factory-made furniture lacked. I showed her our commitment to quality, a value I had learned from my father. She signed the contract on the spot. It was a small job, just 20 tables and 40 chairs, but the cafe, the DAILY grind, became an instant hotspot, featured in every design blog and local magazine, and every single article mentioned the stunning, unique furniture. The phone started ringing. Suddenly, we were on the map. We were the new kids on the block, the cool, innovative alternative to the stuffy, traditional brands. We started getting commissions from interior designers, from boutique hotels, from tech startups looking to furnish their new, hip offices. Each job was bigger than the last. We had to hire more people, buy another machine. We were growing, and we were growing fast. I lived and breathed Axiom. I was the first one in the workshop every morning and the last one to leave. The grief of my father's rejection had been sublimated, transformed into a relentless, burning drive. Every successful project, every glowing review, was a point scored in an imaginary game against him. I told myself it was about building a future, but I knew, in the dark, honest corners of my mind, that it was about demolishing his past. The true declaration of war came at the annual East Coast Design Expo. It was the biggest trade show of the year, a place where multi-million-dollar deals were made. Callahan and Sons had held the same prime spot in the main hall for 2 decades. We, as a new company, were relegated to a small booth in a secondary hall, a spot Jenna had fought tooth and nail to get. Our booth was a masterpiece of her marketing genius. It was sleek, minimalist, and featured a massive screen playing a looped video of our process, the dance of the robotic arm, the spray of the varnish, the final, perfect product. It was a stark contrast to my father's booth, which I knew would be the same as always, a dark, wood-paneled space filled with heavy, ornate furniture, like a museum exhibit. On the second day of the expo, he walked by. He wasn't alone. He was with Mr. Abernathy, the purchasing manager for the prestigious Blackwood hotel chain, a legacy client my father had catered to for 30 years. They stopped about 20 feet from my booth. I saw Abernathy's eyes linger on our display. I saw him say something to my father, gesturing towards our cantilevered desk. "It's the best work I've ever done," he said quietly, his eyes fixed on the bench. He wasn't looking at me. "Your mother, she would have been proud of you." A lump formed in my throat, hot and painful. I couldn't speak. He cleared his throat. "Well, that's all." He turned to leave. "Wait," I said, my voice cracking. He stopped at the door, his back to me. I didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry. I forgive you. I saved you." None of the words were right. So I said the only thing I could think of, the only truth that mattered. "The dovetails are perfect," I said. He paused for a long moment. I saw his shoulders shake, just once. Then, without turning around, he walked out of my office and out of my life. I stood there for a long time, just looking at the workbench, a peace offering, a surrender, an apology, a validation. It was all of those things, and none of them. I ran my hand over the smooth, perfect surface. The smell of wood and varnish filled my office. I had driven his business into the ground, just as I had vowed to do. But in the end, after all the battles, all the anger, all the pain, he had given me back my name, and I realized, with a clarity that was both heartbreaking and healing, that it was the only thing I had ever really wanted. The The smell of fresh-cut oak and varnish is the oldest memory I have. Before I could properly walk, I was crawling on the floor of the Callahan and Sons workshop. A fine layer of sawdust clinging to my clothes like a second skin. My father, Daniel Callahan, was a master craftsman, a man who could coax poetry from a block of wood. His hands, calloused and strong, could shape mahogany into a queen. And leg, with the same reverence a priest showed at the altar. Callahan and Sons wasn't just a business to him. It was a legacy/a testament to a dying art form. And I, his only son, was supposed to be the heir to that legacy. For 28 years I played my part. I learned the trade per eye, honored the traditions. I could tell a piece of cherry from maple by scent alone. I spent my youth in that workshop, breathing in the ghosts of 1,000 felled trees per. My hands learning the same slow, patient language as my father's. I loved the wood, I loved the craft. But I couldn't ignore the world changing outside the workshop's dusty windows. Our clients were getting older. Our methods, while impeccable, were slow and astronomically expensive. We were becoming a relic, a bountiful, handcrafted antique that fewer and fewer people could afford or appreciate. I saw the storm clouds gathering on the horizon, but my father saw only the flawless finish on the tabletop in front of him. He was an artist, not a businessman, and his artistry was about to bankrupt us. That's why I spent 6 months developing the plan. It was a blueprint for the future, a way to merge the soul of our craft with the efficiency of the modern world. I proposed a new line of furniture, Callahan Modern. It would use the same high-quality materials but feature cleaner, minimalist designs. We would incorporate CNC machines for precision cutting of components freeing up our master craftsmen to focus on the intricate joinery and finishing work where their skills truly shone. We would launch an online store, a direct, quick and model that would cut out the stuffy, high-priced showrooms. It was a good plan, a smart plan. It was a plan that would have saved us. I presented it to him in his office/a small wood-paneled room that smelled of pipe tobacco and lemon oil. I had charts. I had sales projections. I had a portfolio of sleek, beautiful designs. I spoke for half an hour, my voice filled with a passion I was sure he would share. When I finished, the silence was heavy and suffocating. My father stared at the designs on the table, his face unreadable. He didn't look at the sales charts. He didn't look at the profit margins. He just looked at the drawings of clean lines and elegant simplicity. Then he looked at me, and the expression in his eyes was not one of pride or interest. It was one of profound, bottomless betrayal. "This," he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "ESN insult. Dad, no," I started. "It's an evolution. It's a way to, it's garbage," he spat, standing up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. "It's soulless factory-made trash. You want to take everything your grandfather and I built, everything I taught you and turn it into this flat-packed heresy. That's not what it is," I argued, my own anger starting to rise. "It's about survival. Look at the numbers. We lost our contract with the Statler Hotel last year because we couldn't deliver on time. We're losing ground. I would rather go bankrupt with my integrity intact than make a single one of these things," he roared, sweeping the designs off the table with a furious swipe of his arm. The papers scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. "You don't understand. You have the hands of a craftsman, Finn, but you have the soul of a salesman. You don't belong here." The words hit me harder than a physical blow. "You don't belong here. In the only place that had ever been my home." "What are you saying?" I whispered. "I'm saying you're out," he said, his voice dropping to a cold, hard whisper. He walked to the door and held it open. "You believe in this new world so much. Go join it, but you will not do it under my roof. You will not do it with my name." He pointed a trembling finger towards the door. "Get out of my workshop." I stared at him, my heart shattering into a million pieces. This wasn't a disagreement. This was an excommunication. He wasn't just firing me from the family business. He was firing me from the family. I walked out of that office, past the craftsmen who lowered their eyes, pretending not to hear. I walked through the workshop, the smell of oak and varnish suddenly choking me, and as the heavy door closed behind me, I made a silent, burning vow. He wanted me to join the new world. Fine, I would build my own company. I would build it on the very ideas he had rejected, and I would become so successful that my victory would be the only thing he could see when he looked up from the ruins of his own beautiful, obsolete, dying world. The first month was a blur of couch surfing and simmering rage. I was officially homeless and jobless, cast out with nothing but the clothes on my back and a checking account that was bleeding money with every passing day. My father had frozen my company credit card and, in a final act of spite, had the locks on the family home changed. The message was clear: I was not welcome. I was in exile. The anger was a constant fire in my gut. It was the only thing that kept me warm at night as I slept on my friend Mark's lumpy sofa. But beneath the anger was a deep, aching grief. It wasn't just the loss of my job or my home. It was the loss of my father, my identity, my past. Everything I thought I was, everything I was supposed to be, had been wiped out in a single, furious conversation. One rainy afternoon, a letter arrived for me at Mark's apartment. It was from a law firm. My first thought was that my father was suing me for something, a preemptive strike I hadn't even considered. My hands trembled as I tore it open. But it wasn't from my father. It was from the estate of my mother. My mother had passed away 5 years ago from cancer. She was the heart of our family, the gentle buffer between my father's stubborn pride and my own restless ambition. She would have understood my plan. She would have found a way to make him understand. The letter informed me that a small trust she had set up for me had now reached its maturation date, triggered by my 28th birthday the month before. It wasn't a fortune, but it wasn't nothing. It was $50,000, enough to put a deposit on a new apartment, to get back on my feet, to live for a year while I figured out my next move. It was a lifeline, a final gift from the one person who had always believed in me. I sat there on that lumpy sofa, the lawyer's letter in my hand, and cried for the first time since he'd thrown me out. I cried for my mother. I cried for the father I had lost. And I cried for the son who had been so brutally cast aside. By the time the tears stopped, the grief had been washed away, leaving something hard and clear in its place: a purpose. This money wasn't just a lifeline. It was seed money. It was a chance. My father thought he had left me with nothing, but my mother had left me with a future. I wasn't going to use it to get an apartment. I wasn't going to use it to survive. I was going to use it to build, to fight. I went out that day and bought 2 things: a new sketchbook and a cup of expensive coffee. I sat in a cafe for hours, the rain streaking down the windows, and I began to draw. I drew the designs my father had thrown on the floor. I refined them. I drew new ones. I filled page after page with clean lines, innovative joinery, and a vision of the future he had been too blind to see. This wasn't just about furniture anymore. This was about vindication. I wasn't just designing chairs and tables. I was designing my revenge. And it was going to be beautiful. My father looked at our booth, then he looked at me. There was no flicker of pride, no hint of recognition. His face was a mask of cold, pure contempt. He said something short and dismissive to Abernathy and guided him away, as if he was shielding the man from something offensive. But the seed had been planted. I saw it in Abernathy's eyes. The curiosity, the interest, the future was calling to him. Jenna had seen the whole exchange. She walked over and stood beside me, her eyes gleaming. Well, she said softly. Looks like the old king is starting to realize there's a new player in the game. She looked at me, her expression serious. The Blackwood contract is up for renewal next year, you know. They're renovating their flagship hotel. It's going to be the biggest furniture contract on the East Coast. She paused, and we're going to take it from him. I looked across the bustling hall at my father's retreating back, and for the first time, I didn't feel a pang of sadness. I felt nothing but a cold, sharp, predatory focus. Yes, I said, the Blackwood Hotel contract became our obsession. It was more than just a job. It was the ultimate symbol. To win it would be to definitively prove that our way was the future and his was the past. Jenna called it our kingmaker contract. I called it the final exam. We spent the next year preparing for the bid. We hired a small sales team. We refined our production process, shaving minutes off every step without sacrificing an ounce of quality. I designed an entirely new line of furniture specifically for the hospitality industry, the Axiom Hotel Collection. It was durable, beautiful, and modular, everything the Blackwoods' new, modern brand was looking for. The war between Axiom and Callahan & Sons was no longer a quiet, undeclared conflict. It was open combat, fought in the boardrooms of architects and the offices of purchasing managers. We started bidding on the same jobs, and more often than not, we were winning. We were faster. We were more flexible. Our aesthetic was what the market wanted. My father's company, once the undisputed titan, was starting to look slow and out of touch. I heard whispers from the craftsmen I still knew. Things were bad at Callahan and Sons. My father, in a desperate attempt to compete, had started cutting his prices, but not his production time. He was taking on jobs at a loss just to keep the workshop busy. He was refusing to see the truth, doubling down on his old ways, treating the market's shift as a personal betrayal rather than a business reality. His pride was a sinking ship, and he was determined to go down with it. The day the Blackwood bid was due, I felt a strange mix of adrenaline and dread. We had put together a flawless proposal. Our designs were perfect. Our price was competitive, but profitable. We had included a 3D rendered video walkthrough of a sample hotel room furnished with our collection. It was a world away from the paper and ink proposals my father would have submitted. 2 weeks later, Jenna got the call. She walked into my office and closed the door, her face unreadable. "We got it," she said, her voice quiet. "They loved the presentation. They loved the designs. The contract is ours." I should have felt a surge of triumph. I should have been ecstatic. But instead, a cold, heavy feeling settled in my stomach. We had done it. We had taken his crown jewel. This wasn't just a lost contract for him. This was a public execution. "Heard anything from your side?" Jenna asked, her professional demeanor softening slightly. "Only that he was so sure he'd get it. He took out a loan to buy a massive new shipment of mahogany," I said numbly. "Abernathy had all but promised it to him. He leveraged the company against this contract." Jenna was quiet for a moment. "Well," she said, her voice turning pragmatic again, "that was a bad business decision on his part. She was right. It was, but it felt like I was the one who had set the trap." The news spread through the industry like wildfire. Axiom Design, the upstart, had stolen the Blackwood contract from Callahan and Sons. It was a changing of the guard, a public orders poured in. We were the new kings. The cost of that victory became apparent a few months later. I was in a coffee shop when I saw him. My father. He was sitting alone at a small table, staring into a cup of coffee. He looked old, not just older, but diminished. The proud, powerful man who had thrown me out of his workshop was gone. In his place was a tired, defeated old man. His suit was frayed at the cuffs. His shoulders were slumped. I almost went over to him. I almost said something. "I'm sorry. Let me help. We can fix this." But what would I say? The chasm between us was too wide, filled with too much anger and pride. My very existence was a condemnation of his entire life, so I did nothing. I paid for my coffee and walked out, leaving him alone with his thoughts. As I walked away, the cold feeling in my stomach intensified. I had won. I had proven him wrong. I had everything I thought I wanted. So why did it feel so much like I had lost? The final blow was not delivered by me, but by my father's own stubborn pride. The loss of the Blackwood contract was a mortal wound to Callahan and Sons, but the massive unsellable stockpile of mahogany he'd purchased was the poison that finished the job. His creditors started calling. He couldn't make payroll. The whispers in the industry turned into front-page news in the business journal. Callahan and Sons' fine woodworking on the brink of bankruptcy. I read the article in my sleek, minimalist office, in a chair of my own design, and I felt a profound sense of nausea. The article detailed his debts, his outdated business model, his refusal to adapt. It painted him as a tragic figure, a king from another era who didn't know when to abdicate. And it painted me, his son, the founder of the wildly successful Axiom Design, as the disruptor, the usurper, the new power in the industry. It was the story Jenna had always wanted to sell, and it was a bestseller. Jenna, ever the pragmatist, saw an opportunity. "This is it, Finn," she said, standing in my doorway. "This is our endgame. We can acquire them for pennies on the dollar. We buy out their assets, the name, the workshop, the equipment, before they go into bankruptcy. We get a legacy brand for a bargain, and we fold it into Axiom." "You want us to buy his company?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "It's the smartest move we can make," she said, her eyes alight with strategic fire. "Think of the marketing. Axiom Design preserves the Callahan and Sons legacy, the son saving the father's work. It's the perfect final chapter to the story." "It's not a story, Jenna," I snapped, standing up. "It's my family. It's my father." "He stopped being your father when he threw you out," she retorted, her own voice rising. "He is your competitor. and your competitor is wounded. In business, you either press the advantage or you get taken out by someone who will. Do you want some other faceless corporation to buy his workshop and turn it into condos? Because that's what will happen if we don't act. She was right. From a purely business perspective, she was absolutely, undeniably right. It was a cold, ruthless, and brilliant move, and the thought of it made me feel sick to my stomach. That night, I couldn't sleep. I wrestled with the decision, pacing the floor of my apartment. The anger that had fueled me for so long had burned out, leaving only ashes and a hollow ache. Was this what I wanted? To stand on the rubble of my father's life and call it a victory? The memory of his face in the coffee shop, so tired and defeated, haunted me. The prideful, powerful man was gone. All that was left was a man who had lost everything. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Hemlock. Your dad is at the workshop, alone. Hasn't left in 2 days. Without thinking, I grabbed my keys and went out into the cold night. I drove to the old workshop, the place I hadn't set foot in since the day he'd kicked me out. The lights were on, casting a warm, familiar glow through the dusty windows. I didn't go in. I just sat in my car across the street, watching the silhouette of my father move inside. He was probably doing what he always did when he was troubled, working with his hands, sanding a piece of wood, trying to create order from chaos. I thought about Jenna's plan, buying the company, preserving the legacy. It was a lie, a pretty story to cover up a hostile takeover. The real legacy wasn't the name or the building. It was the man inside, the man who had taught me everything I knew, and I had used everything he taught me to destroy him. There had to be another way, a way to win without annihilating him completely. I pulled out my phone and called Jenna. We're not buying the company, I said, my voice firm. Finn, don't be sentimental, she started. I'm not, I interrupted. I have a different idea, a better one. I hung up before she could argue. I looked back at the workshop, at the lonely figure inside. The war was over. I had won. Now I had to figure out what to do with the prisoners and the spoils. My plan was not a business decision. It was an act of something. Atonement, maybe. Or just a desperate attempt to find a version of victory I could live with. The next morning, I didn't go to Axiom. I went to the bank, my own personal bank. I met with a wealth manager and laid out a proposal. I wanted to establish a blind trust, a significant one. And I wanted that trust to make an anonymous offer to acquire the outstanding debt of Callahan and Sons from its primary creditors. The move was unorthodox and, from a financial perspective, insane. I was using my own money, the money I had earned from destroying him, to secretly bail him out. I was becoming his silent, invisible benefactor. The trust would offer the creditors the bank, the lumber supplier, pennies on the dollar, buying up the debt for a fraction of its face value. Once the trust owned the debt, it would offer my father a new, restructured loan with terms so favorable he couldn't possibly refuse, low interest, a 30-year term. It would give him the breathing room to survive. He would never know the money came from me. The trust was a fortress of anonymity. To him, it would seem like a miracle, a stroke of good luck, from some faceless investment group. His pride would remain intact. He wouldn't have to accept a handout from the son who had ruined him. It was the only way. It was a way to save the man without him knowing he was being saved. The process took weeks. Jenna was furious with me. This is the dumbest, most sentimental, most financially illiterate thing you have ever done, she'd yelled. You're lighting a pile of money on fire for a man who hates you. It's my money, Jenna, I'd replied quietly, and this is what I'm doing with it. Our partnership was strained, but she didn't quit. She was a shark, but she was a loyal shark. The day the deal was finalized, I felt a quiet sense of relief. The trust now owned my father's debt. The offer of restructuring was on its way to his lawyer. Callahan and Sons would not go into bankruptcy. The workshop would not be sold for condos. It would survive, bruised and battered, but alive. A few weeks later, Hemlock called me. You're not going to believe this, Finn, he said, his voice full of disbelief. Some investment group bought up all of Dan's debt. They're giving him a new loan. He's going to make it. He's calling it a miracle. That's great news, Hemlock, I said, my voice carefully neutral. The best part, Hemlock continued, is the look on his face. I haven't seen him this hopeful in years. He's even talking about hiring a few guys back. I hung up the phone and stared out the window of my office. Down below, the city hummed with life, a complex machine of commerce and ambition. I had played the game, I had won, and then I had secretly, silently, rewritten the rules of the ending. The victory felt less hollow now. It felt clean. I hadn't just proven him wrong. I had proven that his craft, his legacy, could survive in the modern world. I had done for him what he was too proud to do for himself. I knew we would never be a family again. The wounds were too deep, the betrayal too profound. He would never know what I had done, and that was the point. Our relationship was over. But as I looked out at the city, I realized I had not destroyed his world. I had, in my own strange and painful way, saved it. And maybe, just maybe, that was a victory worth having. A year passed. Axiom Design continued its meteoric rise. We became the benchmark for modern furniture design, our name synonymous with innovation and quality. We opened a flagship showroom in Soho. We won every award, graced every magazine cover. I was a success by every conceivable measure. Callahan & Sons, meanwhile, stabilized. They didn't grow, but they didn't shrink either. They returned to what they had always been, a small, niche workshop for wealthy traditionalists. My father started taking on apprentices again, passing on the craft. He was no longer my competitor. He was just a man in a workshop, across town, a ghost from another life. We never spoke. I saw him once, at an industry charity dinner. We were on opposite sides of the ballroom. Our eyes met for a moment. There was no anger in his gaze anymore. Just a weary, sort of resignation. I gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. He didn't return it. He just turned away. The final chapter came unexpectedly. It was a Tuesday morning. My assistant buzzed me. "Finn, there's a Mr. Callahan here to see you." My heart stopped. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "Send him in," I managed to say. He walked into my office. My sleek, minimalist, glass-walled office. He looked small and out of place. A figure from a sepia-toned photograph dropped into a high-definition world. He was holding a long, flat object wrapped in canvas. "Daniel," I said, standing up. I couldn't call him Dad. The word didn't fit anymore. "Finn," he replied, his voice raspy. He looked around my office, at the designs on the walls, at the view of the city skyline. "This is quite a place you've built." "Thank you," I said. An awkward silence stretched between us, thick with everything that had never been said. "I'm not here to fight," he said finally. "I'm retiring, selling the business to Hemlock and the boys. They're turning it into a proper cooperative. It's time." "I see," I said. He looked down at the object in his hands. "I came to give you this." He placed it on my desk and unwrapped it. It was a workbench, a small, perfect, miniature workbench, no more than 3 feet long. It was made of a dozen different kinds of wood: oak, cherry, walnut, maple, mahogany. The joinery was flawless, a symphony of dovetails and mortise. The finish was so deep you felt like you could fall into it. On the front, carved in elegant, simple letters, were 2 words: Finn Callahan. It was the piece he made for every apprentice when they became a master. The final test, the one he had never given me.